Hello and welcome to And It's Live, the history of the Premier League. We are deep into 95-96, the winter of 95-96, and discuss all things going on the pitch, off the pitch, inside English football and outside English football with a huge bearing on it. My two friends, as always, David Edgar's here. How are we doing?
I'm very good, mate. Thank you very much. Looking forward to it. I'm really enjoying doing this season so far.
I said, I think the other week, if I could just relive one season in just about every aspect of life, it would be 95-96. Adam, how are you, my friend?
Good, thank you. It's a proper season, isn't it? It's got everything you could ask for.
It sure does. We left it at the start of November 1995 last time round. We'll pick it up there, as you would maybe understand. In terms of the toings and froings of league football, we'll get to the relegation stuff next week in the most hilarious way possible. But it's really all about the title race here. It could have been won twice in the space of this show. There's a third party just about entering the kind of realistic scope of title challengers. It's all brewing up. So we'll start with there. We'll look into some other things, big things that are going on maybe outside of the Premier League, and then we'll pick it up as we get into a quite fascinating March. I'm not going to start with Manchester United or Newcastle United, Adam. We'll start with Liverpool, and any chance I can get will wax lyrical about the Robbie Fowler that was just filling his boots amongst many strikers, as we've said. He scores 2 in a win over Manchester United in the December. He scores 3 against Arsenal, I think, the following week. Again, this is the second season running he scored the hat-trick against Arsenal. I know Alan Shearer is filling his boots with hat-tricks, Adam. I think we'll maybe give Shearer some kind of due time and attention next week, perhaps. But, you know, Fowler and Collingwood, they're working, and this rejuvenated, should I say, Liverpool side are really starting to just cause problems and get into the conversation as we head into Christmas.
Definitely are. I think the level of goals that Fowler scores, again, I think we see on these shows, very good players are actually somehow underrated, and I don't know if it gets enough love. I don't know if it's just because of the period this is with so much else going on and Liverpool not involved in great games, as we'll come on to, and are exciting, but just not quite. Not the best team in the league, or not dominating the headlines in that kind of way at the business end. I don't know if he just sinks into, I was going to say sinks into the sort of average, but that's not even fair at all. But what do we think that is then, I guess, is my question, because he appears and has a great debut season, 93, 94. Really great when you think the age he is, 18, 19 at that time. Is it just that he never really did it on the same stage as early as Owen did? Is that the whole... I think that's the whole piece where he's maybe not as... I don't remember there being as much excitement or as much wow factor. Maybe it's just the fact that I was a couple of years older when Owen appears. But record, certainly over these 3 or 4 seasons, his first 3 or 4 seasons, stands the test of time. Some incredible league-winning campaigns in the league where he scores 25 goals one season, 28 goals the season after. I don't know, he doesn't seem to get the plaudits for me, I think, for this. We talk about Andy Cole, we talk about Alan Shearer, maybe longevity in Shearer's case, but Owen, comparisons are there for Owen, but it feels like maybe in my head that Owen was regarded as being a level up, and I don't quite know if that's the case if you look at their Liverpool careers. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I'll hand over to David in a minute. We'll come to Owen when we kind of get there, because he had something, pace, as well as that skill that just no one else had. It was frightening. I guess with all these strikers, the ones that last, I think, in the popular imagination, Alan Shearer and possibly Teddy Sheringham, because they're England forwards. They're the ones who get the nod. They're the ones who appear at this homecoming European Championship, which is blown into mythical proportions outside of any kind of realistic assessment, I think is fair to say. And what happened against Argentina in 98. These are memories that stick with the wider casual viewing public, and it's just a shame. I mean, Fowler was in the Euro 96 squad. What an incredible player. He could have won easily if he was German, would have won a medal, because he would have pretty much played in every game. But it was just such a raft. And then it's about, in that international realm, who fits together. It can't just be about chucking the 2 best in. Andy Cole had a horrible time. Colin Moore never really made it. Fowler was probably the next one. Even Ian Wright, bless him, injuries just times and in quite a few of these kind of big tournaments. But I think it's combining club thing with the England thing at a time when English clubs were not making a mark on the Champions League, and I think that's something to bear in mind.
Of course,
at this point.
Of course, now the additional layer that we've got is obviously Champions League, which at this point was only really Manchester United, obviously Blackburn, so there wasn't really the whole proving himself at the Champions League level because not very many teams are getting in. So I guess it probably is that. David, I don't know what your thoughts are. Is it the international thing that maybe doesn't give him the plaudits that he deserves? Because, like I said, those first 4 seasons, he's very good.
I think that when he initially came through Liverpool, the story at Liverpool wasn't about young talented player. It was about, are Liverpool ever going to get back to the level they'd been at? Because you have to remember that in the 80s they were the gold standard. Yeah. So he missed out on the narrative there. Then for the next couple of seasons when he's absolutely flying, they're not winning enough. And over at United, not only are they winning, but there's a group of young players who've come through. So they're getting a lot of the attention. Then, as Martin says, you've got Euro 96. I think Shearer and Sheringham leading Holland, a merry dance, is fixed into the national psyche a little bit. And then Owen comes through and does get more headlines because he was so exciting. Maybe the reason he's got the goal against Argentina, right? So that's your big goal there. But even by the time that Liverpool were winning things that season, 2000-2001, where they won 5 trophies, Fowler seemed like almost yesterday's man a little bit because they had Owen and they had Gerrard by this stage as well, and those have both seamlessly fitted into the England side and have become major names. So I think it was just timing. Liverpool fans referred to him as God, so they knew his value. But I think it was just a question of timing. And you're right. And then, of course, he hasn't, I've seen him do punditry occasionally, but it is very occasionally. So he hasn't tried to push himself into the public consciousness so much. But one thing about him, Adam, I don't know if you know this, Martin, I'm sure you will, that he's a property magnate. And can I just take a moment to praise the Liverpool supporters for their song, We All Live in a Robbie Fowler House in Yellow Submarine. So, but I think for people like me, Martin, who were at that age and were experienced, that Fowler, I think, is still a player that we absolutely love. But I agree with you, and it's kind of why me and him take every opportunity we can on this show to praise him, because I think he has been rather unfairly overlooked.
I remember when he went to Leeds and I was like, oh, at my age, whatever I would have been, it was Robbie Fowler's past it, and he's like 25, 26. Because Owen came along so quickly afterwards. That's
exactly it. He seemed, even at that stage, he seemed like he came from a bit before.
Definitely.
I think you touched on something, David. He's not a pundit. He's not. His face isn't out there. I think he's very conscious that he's not particularly confident in that kind of environment. And maybe there's a bit of the Moneyball thing about it, that it isn't just talent, or it should be, but we're so, and people who make decisions and managers and general public are often so taken in by the persona or thereof, and that kind of comfort in the media, and he just looks and sounds and is just this scally lad that is just so talented, but doesn't quite fit. Owen isn't like that. Owen's from Cheshire or whatever.
Gerrard isn't. Gerrard's a scally, but he's a very polite and handsome scally. No disrespect to Robbie Fowler.
Also phenomenal in an area where England needed a bit.
And he's got that Captain Marvel thing, you goal against Olympiacos, except for the Champions League final. But it is true that Robbie Fowler probably doesn't have that definitive moment. Owen, you've got the 2001 Cup final, even for Liverpool, ahead of England World Cup goal. Gerrard, so many that you can pick out. So he sort of gets caught in between Rush and Owen, I think. And it isn't fair because he was brilliant. If only this Liverpool team had won one title in that era, I think he'd be valued a lot higher.
Well, here's a kind of, again, we will come to Shearer and a phenomenal record in a Blackburn side that was struggling, as we discussed last week. Could you tell me a goal or describe a goal he scored in this season? You'd be struggling because they're not at the sharp end of anything. They're not winning anything, and it's a bit different. So I think you're right. We'll come back to Liverpool and Fowler at the end of the show, because Fowler scores, I think, the goal of the season that no one will remember for that very reason. And next week, we do have to spend some time, I think, at the end on that Spice Boys thing, because this Liverpool story, I think, is actually very interesting, overshadowed, obviously, by the two Uniteds at the top of the table. So let's just take a little temperature check on where things were. Newcastle finished last week's show very strongly beating Liverpool, in fact, at the start of November. Ferdinand just can't stop scoring until he does, I guess. We continue on into December pretty comfortably. There's a silly 3-draw, a sign of things to come, perhaps, away to Wimbledon. Chelsea then beat them, but they stabilise and go to Old Trafford at the end of December 27th, so just after Boxing Day, obviously, in the festivities. English points clear of Manchester United. A win there, and really, even with a defence as porous as that, 13 points is surely to goodness much. The reason they have that lead is because United have an absolute horror show of a December. We discussed that, anything with kids, that blip on the opening day is kind of forgotten about. They do all right. Arsenal beat them. They doing absolutely fine, and then hit this awful run of form at the end of November. A draw away to Forest again. Forest being a bit of a pain in the arse to them. A draw at home to Chelsea. A 2-2 draw to Sheffield Wednesday, and then 2 defeats against away to 2 of the worst teams, David, they could probably find, which of course is Liverpool, the 2 Fowler goals, and then a 3-1 defeat, I think, at Road. So this is the run up to Christmas. Leeds United game, I think it's Christmas Eve. It's hellish form. No wins in 5, 10 points behind as they welcome Newcastle to Old Trafford on the 27th. Also going to finish with what happens in the kind of game, and next week we'll go into the kind of...
This should be over. Been, in my opinion, psychologically, as much as anything. And we mentioned our first show that we did for this season, you don't win anything with kids, right? I think that talking to people at that show about it, there's almost this perception that it was they won the next week and it was almost forgotten about. It wasn't. This is being used by United fans at this point against Ferguson. We sold Ince, we sold Kanchelskis, we sold Hughes, and we haven't replaced them. And now they're in this burst of form. Look at Newcastle. They spent money in the summer, still going out, and they're miles ahead of us right now. There's an internal crisis, not maybe within the actual club itself, but within the club environs. It's not outsiders saying this. This is fans. This is people sitting in Old Trafford who are saying this. Now, we don't know at this point that Eric Cantona is just about to decide to go, actually, I make up for last year, I'll just win this title on my own. We don't know that at this point. Look, I'd never say never, and Keegan had that collapse in him at any given point. We know that, really. He's that type of personality. But if they win this day, go 13 points clear, a long way back. And the noise, which was already significant around United, gets louder. And tense, it's 0-0 half time. You can go either way. 0-0 at that point for Newcastle isn't a terrible result, but they can't play that way. They can't shut up shop. They can't go, we'll take a point, lads. It's not in their nature. So the game becomes end to end. Great for us, neutrals. I think a more pragmatic manager might have said, especially at half time, what we hold minimum. He couldn't do that. It wasn't in his nature. And then again, I'm saying that a more pragmatic manager might have got them a draw there and they go, but a more pragmatic manager doesn't have them where they are.
That situation.
Wouldn't be in that situation.
Didn't turn up. Ferdinand and Ginola, who have been absolutely outstanding signings, they're poor. Andy Cole, of all people, early on, and United just batter them. Keane gets a goal in the second half. He peels off at the back, Adam. So left back, left centre half position in acres of space. Brilliant control and finish. Remember that move and remember the space that someone has taken left-hand side of the Castle box with all that time to score vital goals. United had to win. It's cut back to 7. At least it's in play. We just touch on Cole again, and I'm sorry to kind of bring this up because he is United fans, writers will say struggling. He gets 10 league goals this season, Adam, right? In the end. A dear friend and colleague, Rob Smythe, had written a piece years ago, actually. It's at the cup final, which we'll obviously get to next week. It looks like he's having a nervous breakdown. Cantona does not respect him. Just having an absolute horrible time. 10 league goals isn't disastrous. This is an important game. He's scoring on the final day of the season to be part of all that. I think he gets pneumonia in the summer. He gets a bad injury the next season, and when he comes back from that injury, I don't know if the shackles are off he's like, oh, fuck this, here we go, and he's on to be absolutely superb. One thing I just wanted to ask you from maybe a more technical point of view, he was a goal scorer at Newcastle, and Ferguson was determined, because he wanted Collymore, who was an all-round player, he was determined to turn Andy Cole into an all-round player. That's hard. And of course, there will be teething problems. It's like a golfer changing their swing. They will look like a learner for quite a wee while until a lot of these new ideas and things click. The mental strength to come through the back end of that is what gets Cantona back on side and say, like, you've got huge balls, pal. Cole goal game actually over the course of his United career is very, very impressive, but it isn't happening here regularly anyway.
No, first thing for me is that I love that goal. It's just Keane's is better, I guess, for the takedown and execution of it. I just love it. It's just such a great Man United goal at this time, I guess. Giggs, great pass over, and then it's one of those. See, when one of my favourites is when it goes over someone's shoulder and they hit it back across themselves and score. Kind of did that in reverse. It was on the deck, obviously, so it's not over his shoulder. But just that, I think it was really difficult, that type of goal to score, I think, because of the timing you have to. It's not as if you get a couple of touches to set yourself. It's perfect. You have to have it coming across you and hit it, and it's a really good goal. You maybe easy to think, how difficult is it to be a Man United striker, to be honest, but that's him and Cantona going through personal issues, shall we say, for maybe different reasons. It's not as plain sailing as it would be for Shearer at Blackburn or his Newcastle career in terms of things that he's done. So fair play to them for that. And yeah, I think that whole episode and the resilience and all that sort of stuff is in good stead. It's a tricky one, that, isn't it, with Cole, because he's obviously one of those. There's more ways to, we spoke about this before, haven't we? But there's more ways to, I guess, understand players now, or have players as different personalities off the field. And looking back at it, somebody that's media shy, somebody that's this, somebody that's that. It's probably any number of things, self-esteem, anxiety, all that sort of stuff, that you're not really wanting to put yourself out there. Now, you never really think about that as football players, but I think we're getting a lot better at it. So it's funny, again, looking back at things like that and thinking, it's not just as easy as turning up and playing and scoring goals. So he's went through the mill in this season, and I think he'll probably be thankful for that support and the respect that he got from Cantona. But I think probably thankful as well that there's people that want to hold him to the standards too. Did not have a great season here. He still scored a fair amount of goals. The season after, he struggles as well, but I think a couple of seasons after that, where you start to see him getting back to that sort of Newcastle goal scoring best. So yeah, I would say it would probably go down as a challenging first couple of years for him. But yeah, at the end of the season, he definitely is through the back of it.
A bit of a myth is that United win this game back to 7 points and then they reel them in. It's back again. Very, very to beat QPR, but then on New Year's Day they go to Spurs and Spurs twat them. I mean, Spurs win 4-1. I mean, it's an absolute battering. And Newcastle, I think, go the second and to be at home. But they're 7 points ahead with a game in hand. So in theory, that 10 is kind of still there. And 10 should just be far, far too much. You need to get back on track. I mean, that nonsense at White Hart Lane is the last bit of nonsense that we will see from the squad. I think it's probably fair to say, for the rest of the season. And they beat West Ham later in January, and Ferguson said something along the lines of, we're still in it. And it's all really about Newcastle handle this because they've not been here before, and they've got a lot of away games to come in the second half of the season that are tricky. They need to go to Elland Road, they need to go to Highbury, they need to go to Anfield, they need to go to Ewood Park, City, and West Ham. Okay, they can still be tricky games. Not you need to go to. United have had, apart from the trip to St James's Park, obviously, United's big away games they're all in the rear view mirror. It's the first inkling of, we're watching you, and how are you going to cope? We will return to this story later on the show, but we'll take a wee break just now. Okay, gentlemen, a few other bits and welcome back outside of the Premier League realm. December 15th, 1995, I turned 15. That's not the point. A little-known Belgian footballer court case in European Court of about the freedom of contract and freedom of miss, of course, Jean-Marc Bosman, whose club would not allow him to transfer the team he wanted to go and just kept him, almost like an indentured slave, really, and thought that this was probably unfair. European law, as it turned out, it was limiting foreign players in your team because it's prohibiting work. And that, I do remember it discussed on Radio Clyde on a Saturday about what we mean for football, and some of the chairs of players' unions would mean, and Graham Kelly, the chief executive, at the time they were the football, basically talking about assets and players just as chattel, really, going to change almost immediately, and it just in sync with the Premier League's expanding TV deal and the pipeline UTV deal the month before with the Ensley Football League. So the divisions below, which cut and everything, and everything's on Sky. They'll show Championship as we understand it on a Friday night, bits and pieces like that. Coca-Cola Cup League in place as well. Everything's moved to the new league deal, which is going to be the next again season. Everything's just in this rhythm of explosion, and players going to be wealthier beyond their wildest dreams. Ironically, John Mark Bosman was not one of them.
No, it's always the way, isn't it? It's like I'm sure he's very wealthy, but really for inventing the internet, you should be probably a lot wealthier than you are. But it took a while though, didn't it? Obviously on our Champions League show, the main event that we did last year, just the 75 ep in the back catalogue, if anyone wants to go and dig through those. But we spoke about how David's basically, as soon as Bosman ruling was in, it felt right away gone, and that whole Ajax team took a blow in the UK. I don't know why. Maybe just a bit sceptical of these foreigners with their and logic, and possibly
Alan Sugar Adam. You've got Carlos Kickaball demanding all this money. The game's kind of got a handicap, was almost literally his reaction to that. Carlos Kickaball was definitely the very understated and nuanced phrase.
Of course. Do you know? Obviously for me, Steve is the first I remember as the most hype one, but a little question. I missed the question last week, which was which European club did Les Ferdinand go to inexplicably when he was about 18. So if any viewers know that, you can message us in and with the answer. For you two, who was the first UK Bosman transfer? Does anyone know? It was in 1996, so it wasn't as long as Steve McManaman's, but who was the first UK Bosman?
I'm pretty sure it was a Scottish player, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it was Paul Kane. Left from it was abroad.
Abroad. Viking Stavanger.
Yeah, I remember it was Paul Kane and Aberdeen and St Johnstone. Yeah, I think he came back to St Johnstone was later. But yeah, this is I can't remember yesterday, but there he was.
Didn't exactly do very well. He wasn't even there for a year and came back with his tail between his legs the year after. But he did it, and that's the main thing. But yeah, I think just to round off that, it took a while. I remember thinking in my head, McManaman was not the first, the most high profile. But even at that time, when McManaman 3 or 4 years later, you're like, wow, okay, play. And English players at this I wasn't familiar with going abroad. Obviously, I missed the whole late 80s thing with Lineker and all those guys going away. So when McManaman went to Madrid, I was like, whoa, that's quite something. And then obviously over the next couple of years, it would be a lot more regular. But yeah, it just sort of speaks to behind the times, but maybe set in their ways, because we spoke about Bergkamp and Hula and even Cantona and Zola coming in. It's years since that was sort of happening in Serie A, and then this happening. Like we said, Ajax had been decimated probably twice by now before McManaman goes, and it just it speaks to that sort of insular, which I think was all the rage at that point, sort of pre-1996, shall we say, in that kind of modern, not so modern culture. So yeah, I think the Bosman ruling was before that, maybe whether it was as good or not. I think it's interesting that it took a bit longer than I would have thought to really take hold. And
I think McManaman, Adam, sticks in mind because £110,000 a week.
Yeah,
that's what grabbed the headline, and that obviously Real Madrid do not have to pay a transfer fee or don't have to go to tribunal to be set a transfer fee. So that, I think, was a change. Like, right, players are, and I'm not sure fans really get still to this day, or they got them on a Bosman as if you still have to pay. There still has to be outgoings of player and agents and whatever else. But that's probably what why that transfer remains resonant. David, I kind of intimated, I think the biggest impact for English clubs wasn't so much that they could get players without a transfer fee. It was the foreigners rule, the illegal foreigners rule that had been in since 88, 89, although there was a 3 grace period when that came in that basically said the foreigners you have at your club are naturalised for 3 years, but then, you know, if you still have them, they be those extra players. And I think that obviously held English clubs, British clubs back, because fair to say we were not churning out the world's greatest. But all of a sudden, it didn't matter. All of a sudden, this big league that was starting to really spend money and bring money in and market itself as something very different. The path was kind of open to breaking through, because in 95, 96, for example, David, is not a banner year for English clubs in Europe. Nottingham Forest kind of fly the flag late-ish on in the UEFA Cup, and even then Bayern Munich absolutely scud them on their way to that UEFA Cup. Blackburn, absolute catastrophe, Champions League. So it opens a door that, let's be honest, was only because of English clubs, because that Liverpool's success with really hardly any English players in the team, Scottish, Republic of Ireland, Welsh players, so many countries across Europe said, well, this isn't really, they're all associations, so just split up that kind of British. But this was a moment in terms of expansion of the league, because players come here now, hope of not just earning money, but actually competing eventually in Europe.
Really intrigued to hear you talking there about Graham Kelly, because I remember him very forthrightly saying, well, this just means that the money in football is going to end up going to the players, and sort of expecting that people would go, that's terrible.
Yeah.
And then they didn't, because it was something, again, you know, spoken before about the influence on American sport, on David Dean and chairman post 94. They had long recognised, actually, the people who draw, we have the power, you know, and their unions in a sport were far more take action. It's almost still inconceivable that football players would strike, whereas we've had that in major US sports before, where they've realised, well, without us, there is no game. There was this attitude for years, I think, in English, of you're lucky to be doing this. You know, you're lucky to be earning this money. Don't guilt up. I mean, Jimmy Hill actually had to break the maximum as chairman of the PFA. It did become very, very quickly, with the McManaman one, there was some. But you mentioned there, Martin, that you don't think people fully understand it yet. Trent Alexander-Arnold recently moving there. And Liverpool fans, I presume in all sincerity, saying, he should sign a contract so we get a fee. And it's like, guys, here's how the deal works. Real Madrid are going to give him probably 20 million up front because he's a £100 million player. But if he signs for Liverpool, they're going to, again, to get the fee. You're asking him to donate this money to your club, basically. It was illegal. It was clearly illegal. I don't think you had to figure that out. It went against every post-92 European freedom of movement law. The contract thing was, you know, we knew in Scotland how fair it was because we'd heard talking about it. Jim McLean at Dundee United with his legendary 10-year contracts for players. And then, as you say, once they could hold a registration and effectively put you out of employment. And an employer can't have that right. So what I would say that what is interesting to me about it is the three foreigners, that whoever had the most money was liable to be able to bring these players in, a massive transfusion of money. The initial beneficiaries of it were the Italian clubs, and maybe as a degree of cynicism, the rule that was brought in pretty quickly that you can more than 2 clubs in a season came on the back of AC Milan going to Ajax, as Adam mentioned, basically just filleting them, taking half a dozen players, one of whom they wanted, but selling the other 5 almost immediately for, I think, a combined 120 million. And Ajax quite rightly went, here, hold on a minute. There's something gone far wrong here, and that's when that law was brought in. It was received at the time, Martin, with, I think, some fear that you mentioned there. Sugar's vaguely racist remark, I think, was generally how a lot of people felt about it, that, we're going to fill it with cheap foreigners, basically. And people won't. But I remember seeing an interview with the band. Do you remember the annoying, irritating 90s post-Britpoppers Space? Who hit with the Species? I remember them doing an article in 442 magazine just as Gerard Houllier had been appointed, and then saying, well, you better not fill the team with foreigners because we don't like that. We like local lads. And the reason it sticks in my mind is just for what you said. Didn't you win a double in '86 with no no English player, Steve McManaman. It had rankled, it does rankle with other nations that Britain has international teams. It rankles with other nations that Britain have the corresponding European places. Their view is wait a minute, England's island. Yeah. Legally, you're not a country. You know, you are part of something that is bigger than that. SOP had been brought in. The floodgates were open. They were open for everybody. I think Adam has a very good point, though, that British football, with its suspicion of anything new at that time, far more cosmopolitan now, does take a wee bit longer to. There's even some talk over here of clubs not doing it in a sort of gentleman's agreement for a bit, which seems wild now, but almost that you would say, that the Premier League clubs are not going to take players from each other, Blighty and tins of spam and walks over the night on it was kind of village green, but it was almost immediately disregarded. And then footballers, it's the theory. If you are in a dressing room and someone has come from us on a huge wage because there was no transfer fee, you are then going to turn around to your club and say, I should be on that wage. I am a senior player at this club. And clubs then began to realise the effect of this, that it was going to cause wages to go across. If you are bringing someone into a club, and he's coming in, as I say, on a high wage, your existing players are going to go, surely they're going to go to the manager and say, here, I should be on what he's on. That is, of course, as we know, what happened. And I still don't think we're finished with, there's the Diarra case now in 2026 as we speak, which could end, as we know them, full stop. So what I will say about Bosman is he suffered for this, because nobody would come afterwards.
No.
The reason this has existed so long was because clubs knew that to do it, someone would have to basically take 3 years out of their career. And he was brave enough to do it. There's a lot of footballers out there who live in big homes that owe that guy for his bravery. But I suppose his reward for it is we are still in 2026 referring to us as Bosmans.
Okay, everything shooting ahead. The modernisation of England, it's all moving towards a bright new future, and the European Championships round the corner as well. What could possibly go wrong? We'll get back to the title race and all of that, and a signing that may well have destabilised it all in the next part of the show. Righty, we left Newcastle in pretty much the same position as we discussed at the start of the show. They were in good place. They're riding high. Ferguson's gauntlet thrown down at the end of January doesn't really appear to have destabilised too much. They have 3 wins after that. Bolton, Sheffield Wednesday at home, and then they go to Middlesbrough. But the writing probably is on the wall, actually, and this is what I kind of want to discuss. At the end of January, Keegan decides, with things drying up a little, the wins are there, but the margins are getting a bit close. In all competitions, I think they'd won 2 and 9. And Les Ferdinand, for example, who had a wonderful first half of the season, had now dried up. And he was starting to get a bit concerned. He speaks to Ferdinand in the showers after one particular game to say, I'm signing someone else. And that, of course, would be Faustinho Asprilla. Adam, the myth is he comes and you look at the results on paper, doing well, and he comes and the whole thing kind of falls apart because he upsets the apple cart, and tactically Newcastle doing something quite different. Again, I defer to Rob Smythe here, who would absolutely maintain that this isn't actually true. Newcastle were stuttering. Their away form is really starting to become a bit of an issue. Asprilla comes off the bench against Middlesbrough. Newcastle already 1 down. He changes the game. He creates both goals, I think, to get Newcastle the win late on. He plays a part, even though Newcastle starting to ship goals and drop points. He's still doing his bit, I suppose. Rob would argue that given that things are drying up front, and 6.75 million is there, why not bring something a bit different? A guy who has got all the confidence in the world, is not going to buckle under whatever Alex Ferguson says. You've got players starting to really act out. I think David Ginola elbows Lee Dixon in the face in the League Cup as Arsenal knocked them out, and things just starting to get a little tense. And Rob actually says it's when they signed David Batty that's the problem, because David Batty is the defensive midfielder. Newcastle don't play with a defensive midfielder. All of a sudden, they're changing their whole style because that really is panic buying, and we'll maybe get into why Keegan felt that panic by the time that March came around. But your thoughts on Asprilla, what he gave to Newcastle, and is it just coincidence rather than causation that when he came onto the pitch, Newcastle's form is going to go absolutely tits up?
So I don't think he's the cause, but I think there's more to it. For me, he obviously is a bit of a maverick, quite unorthodox, shall we say. I think he takes Keith Gillespie's place mostly in the team, and doesn't offer as much off the ball as a Gillespie would do. I think that's fair to say. So I guess you're upsetting the balance a little bit there. The manager is losing it. I think losing it in public, obviously, very famously, as we'll come on to. But there are signs. I think obviously that, for example, taking Gillespie out, the players becoming a little bit miffed because Asprilla coming in changes the whole picture. It changes the whole way of playing. You lose a bit of balance. Now, for me, thinking in my head, Batty coming in to accommodate Asprilla further forwards sort of kind of makes a little bit of sense there. I could kind of see that, but like you said, it changes how they play. You're upsetting the whole apple cart at a time when you really don't want to be upsetting the apple cart there. So it was a little bit, the Batty thing was a little bit at odds with how they played. Asprilla was very in tune with this forward going football, all that sort of stuff, but I think Batty just stifled it because they weren't negative in midfield, like you said. And yeah, I think there's a lot going on. I think there's a moment, is it the Arsenal game with Asprilla, where there's an incident with the manager. He has some sort of set to, and Asprilla leaves and basically leaves the stadium in the back of a motorbike to avoid traffic. And he later said it's pointless listening because he couldn't understand Keegan anyway. And it's kind of one of those things that it doesn't feel like a happy place. It feels like it is collapsing a little bit. Signings are being made that could and should have been maybe the catalyst, but it just seems to move them further and further away. So yeah, on the pitch, obviously, brilliant player, has some great moments in this season, and is obviously someone that I think now Newcastle fans will still remember very fondly. But he doesn't do enough over the piece for me. If you're bringing in someone like that and you're going to upset the momentum or what they've got going there, to only have 3 goals, I think he gets this season at the back end, when you need someone to come in and give you that bit of an injection, it's not quite there. So yeah, I'd probably overall I would agree with Rob, but I do think maybe the Asprilla out and Gillespie thing maybe upsets just a little bit more than the on-pitch balance. It maybe just upsets the harmony in the team as well, because they were going great guns before that. But I do think Keegan and the overall environment is probably a much bigger issue.
Yeah, they were going great guns until, I guess, Christmas, and then the wins are there, but things aren't quite clicking. And I mean, Camera managers, David, just trust that's football, right? Especially it's winter football in Britain. It's not supposed to be nice at this time of year. Just, the wins are fine. The gap's still where it is, and we'll get through that. I don't have to just go out and buy the next exciting thing to recapture the excitement that we had at the start of the season. It's not for that January in England.
No, it's very difficult to not apply what we now know about Kevin Keegan, and what is widely agreed about his strength and his weaknesses onto this. At the time, you're absolutely right. A calmer manager doesn't, dare we say, panic a little bit. A calmer manager says, no, I believe in this. Les Ferdinand, great player. He's going to score goals. Going through a barren period right now, but we are still winning. He'll come back into form. We need to just get through this. A calmer manager does that. Then again, the other side of the coin is, I agree with Adam. Maybe they did need a little bit else. Maybe they were running out of steam and they needed something. But what is absolutely then unarguable, I do believe that part one is true that you just mentioned, but then the players they get aren't right for the reasons that you mentioned right at the start. I was a big Serie A fan back, well, I still am, but back then especially. And when I heard they were interested in Asprilla, I immediately thought, wonderful player, head case. It wasn't unknown at the time. He was famously capable of going off on one. And I did wonder how he would fit into that particular dressing room and environment and whatnot. But terrific football, and his debut, he scores a brilliant goal, and you're thinking, right, well, fair enough, he's just a brilliant footballer, and that will do. I think that the reason that Ferguson was able to penetrate so much was that, as anyone who's teased someone will know, you'll keep going back if they keep biting. And Kevin Keegan keeps biting. Signing David Batty, we'll come to next week, is biting. Signing Asprilla is biting. It's hearing Ferguson say, well, they need to go to here, and here, and him actually registering that and thinking, we need to do that. We need something, and you can't help but feel, and again, we've already spoken about this, it's the catch-22. Newcastle, without him, I'm not in this position, but with him, are probably not going to win a title. Well, don't win a title. We've probably needed now. I think that Asprilla becomes, if you like, a convenient repository for why did Newcastle not win the league. I think the deeper, in Rob's piece, and I urge people to go and read it as well, sums it up, that Newcastle were not psychologically capable of winning a league title that year. And this is not even a couple of years before, when you had 5 or 6 teams going for their first. This is now Manchester United with a much more comfortable and much more assured Alex Ferguson in the dugout, and players who have title medals in their possession. And it's what we then see over the next 6 months is actually the public unraveling of Kevin Keegan and his football team. And as the pressure mounts, we are still in an era of tabloid influence and strength. People read them, and they're picking up on this. He's given them great headlines. He's given them great thought pieces, and he's given Sky wonderful content. But everybody could see what was going on, and nobody at Newcastle was able to stop it.
Yeah,
I think if you swap these two, if you swap the two managers at this point that we're talking about, so just before this West Ham game, I think if you swap the two managers here, Ferguson wins the league for Newcastle. I think even with the
it's a talented group, Adam. You just need it's important. This West Ham game.
I think Ferguson would have shat himself about that defence right enough. I think.
But he'd have done something about it. I think even if you take Ferguson out of the equation and it's another Man United manager, I think Newcastle probably still win the league. It's just the right two people for Man United, but the wrong two people for Newcastle in some sort of psychological warfare.
If Ferguson had, for whatever reason, retired or gone to live on a farm in the summer of '95, or said, right, that's it, after I can't be bothered, after losing the title on the last day, and United have a manager with something to prove, it's maybe different. Yeah. But he's content. He ain't getting sacked. He knows it if they don't win the league, and almost in a way going 12 points behind and then coming back, you've nothing to lose anymore. Because you've had the kickings from the media and from your fans, and if you're back in it and you win it, it's a bonus from there. And the pressure isn't off; it never can be at a football club of the size of Manchester United. But he's been very good at deflecting, making sure that for every ounce of pressure that's been placed on Man United, he's making sure it's double on Newcastle United. And it's so interesting because over the year we hear so much about Fergie's mind games, and really the only person that they ever worked on was Kevin Keegan, but they worked on him so well that it became a thing for all eternity.
It's just that defensive thing. He may well have shot himself, but United ended that game against Newcastle at Old Trafford with David May and Gary Neville at centre back. I mean, they had a fair few injuries around that time. It's that calm assurance and strength and whatever else that just gets men over the line, I suppose. Right, that 21st of February then, of the morning of the 21st of February, and indeed the afternoon, and indeed 7:30, Newcastle were 9 points ahead with a game in hand. All things being equal, 12 points ahead coming to the end of February. A quietly important night. United beat Everton 2-0 at Old Trafford. They need a late Ryan Giggs goal to do the business. They didn't get a little tense. Newcastle are insipid at West Ham. The away form is going to be a big problem. So that's down to 6 with a game in hand. Still 9 points. Nothing to worry about here. Away to Manchester City. Comic Manchester City that we will delve into next week. Somehow end up drawing 3-3. Asprilla looks like he's won it for them kind of late on. They contrive to concede an equaliser. Asprilla elbow Keith Curle in the face. Probably should have been sent off. He gets a 1-match ban retrospectively. All a bit tense. So now it's 4 with a game in hand, and we get to the 4th of March. Should be said the day before, 3rd of March, funnily enough, on Super Sunday, Liverpool played Aston Villa, and we're 3-0 up in 8 minutes. And Robbie Fowler, go and search it out. The second, Robbie Fowler's first, the second of the game is absolutely stunning. And he almost scores a replica at Old Trafford, funnily enough, against Aston Villa in the FA Cup semi-final the next month. So Liverpool are still floating about there. Long shots, but they've got something about them, but ultimately will just drop too many silly points around some statement wins. Everything centred on the 4th of March then, at St James's Park. Newcastle 4 ahead, game in hand, could be 7. This could make it effectively 10. This, again, their second chance, David, in the space of 3 months to really win the league. This time at home, and they batter Manchester United in that first half. I mean, absolutely batter. I think Peter Schmeichel is one of the best games of his United career.
I'd say
Philip Albert, I think, rattles the bar. They do everything but score, but they don't score. And the second half, United just get a foothold and then a stranglehold. And then, lo and behold, at the back of the left back in acres of space as the ball's floated over is Eric Cantona, who drives it into the floor and up into the back of the net. And United control the game. And again, right, a really disappointing game. Newcastle still top of the league, could be 4 points ahead if they win their game in hand, blah, blah, blah. But you can see, David, that Keegan is utterly deflated because he knows this run-in is harder for him than it is for United.
I remember vividly watching this game at university in the sports bar at the university I was at, because the place was full of Geordies and Manx. And at the end, the Geordies were bereft and the Manx were absolutely joyous, singing we're going to win the league, and not getting much in the way of a defiant response from the Newcastle fans. So that's my anecdotal, unscientific remembrance of it. The goal's brilliant though, isn't it? The finish, just the body shape he has to, it's so clever. They destroyed United in the first half. If XG was a thing back then, we'd have been troubling Roy Castle on record breakers. They make so many golden opportunities. Schmeichel is brilliant. He really is, just shot after shot. He's dealing with everything, and you feel it. As a neutral sitting watching this, it's easier to feel the temperature in the room that I was in, but you feel it through the TV. Every save, the Newcastle fans are getting more and more, what have we got to do? Then the next thought that follows that, every football fan has had it, is they're going to get one soon. They get one, and then you're like, God, we were struggling to get one, now we need to get two. And United see it over the line. Without having played well, they hadn't.
They played well in the second half, but they could have been dead and buried.
They should have been
missing? Who was missing?
They should have been 3 down
from that game.
They should have been 3 or 4 down, but they were so. I think everybody just felt. You talk a lot, Martin, about the psychology of football, and I find it endlessly fascinating. I don't think there's anything worse for a team that getting a lead, especially an inexperienced when it comes to winning team, to have a lead chipped off. I think it's better for them to be in a head-to-head that's up and down, because when you've had the big lead, you spend so much time as it begins to winnow down looking like that rather than looking ahead at what you've got. And this game just felt like, that way that when you watch a team concede a team that's struggling, you go, and they concede a comedy goal, you go, they're doomed. And everyone sort of agrees, because this game just felt like they're not winning the league. United are, and of course it turned out to be true.
Adam, just a couple of things for me quickly, because we're conscious of time here. Does Keegan get it right or wrong? Because his team are brilliant in that first half. Esprit is fantastic. Everything looks like it's perfectly synchronized and beautiful and attractive, and it's just missing maybe that bit of luck. However, that's another goal against the same team who scored that goal a few months ago. How have you not prepared for that cross ball from their left to their right, and you're still leaving key players, brilliant world-class players, in acres of space?
Yeah, I think they do work it well across to get the ball in, but it's not a rapid counter-attack or anything like that. It's patient play across it and blocked across on that side, fair enough, or have someone, just wasn't bothered with defending, really, was he? With that sort of attacking Arsenal. And again, luck is a big thing in football, and we sort of discount it. The swipe in the middle of the box, is it Phil Neville, Gary Neville, were swipes in the middle of the box, and Ferdinand balloons it over the bar. That's Les Ferdinand isn't a terrible player. That is if he does that 10 times, he'll score 8 of them, 9 of them, probably. So it's just these things that the Schmeichel save on another day, the one in the first half where he hits it up with his hand and then it just pops up nicely for him to catch. Good teams fall on the margins, on the right side of the margins, a lot more. If they're doing things the right way, the margins will come for them, and I think you see that with Man United. When it is just built on vibes, for want of another word, like Newcastle were, when those vibes don't fall for you and you don't have a solid structure behind you and you're going to leave Cantona unmarked at the back post inexplicably, then exactly the same goal as Keane, as you alluded to, in the return fixture, then that's naivety. That's just I'm going to score one more goal than you in the games where that doesn't happen. I'm kind of screwed, to be honest.
Cantona with the goal, Manchester United win 1-0. That will become a familiar result over the next few weeks. That'll do us for just now, gents. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Cheers, David.
No, that was great. Our apologies to Newcastle fans for going over what must be an incredibly painful period, but I'm pretty sure it's something that they'll have done many times over their life. Yeah.
Beware, listeners, viewers, we could be 2.5 hours next week. There is a lot to get into. I'd love it, etc. The greatest Premier League game of all time, quite possibly, and that's not even getting into Manchester City, the relegation story, Spice Boys, and Liverpool's incredible end to that particular season, and a lot more besides. Thank you very much, and until next time, bye for now.